Welcome to the Doctor's Life Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Dianne. Think of the podcast as a mobile doctor's lounge where we take some time out and explore topics that doctors are interested in related to what it means to be a doctor in today's world and creating a rich, satisfying, and meaningful life, as well as making the healthcare system better for doctors and patients. So, if you are a doctor, you'll feel right at home, and if you aren't a doctor, you'll get a better understanding of doctors and what we think about and talk about. I know you will enjoy the conversation. Let's jump in. Hey, before we get started today, I have some news to share with you guys. You might know me as a board-certified anesthesiologist, physician coach, national speaker, and workshop leader on burnout, or you might know me as best-selling author of Dr. Heal Thyself. What you might not know is that I'm founder of the Physician Coaching Academy, where we train doctors and leaders in medicine to become powerful peer coaches. Doctors just like you have become coaches, have started peer coaching programs within their organization, and have added coaching to their skill set in their current roles. I'm looking for a few doctors to join my exclusive coach training where you'll learn all of the skills that you need to become a powerful life and career coach in just 10 short weeks. Class starts on September 10th, so you need to get on my schedule now to see if it's a good fit for you. Just go to www.talkwithdrdianne.com to schedule an appointment. That's www.talkwithdrdianne.com. And now, truly, on to the show.
Hey, hi guys. I'm Dr. Dianne. I'm a board-certified anesthesiologist and certified professional coach. And I help doctors to create their best life and create real health in mind, body, and spirit through my TV show right here, the Doctor's Life Podcast, and private one-on-one coaching. Today we're going to be talking about leaving clinical medicine. This is a super juicy topic. And why are we talking about this? In some ways it's kind of a taboo topic. How can we be talking about not seeing patients? Can you still be a doctor and not see patients? I did a survey recently of doctors, and I got about 90 responses. This is actually one of the topics that came up really frequently in terms of what doctors are concerned about in terms of their careers. Also, I talk about it with my clients, and I get asked a lot about this since I left clinical medicine 6 years ago. At that time, it felt like it was a lot harder to do. And I remember when I was actually getting some help and getting some mentoring from a good friend of mine, Dr. George Cole. Hey, Dr. Cole. We were talking about it in terms of like going to the dark side. So things are loosening up some, and it's an awesome topic to talk about. So I'm so glad to be able to share this with you today. So I'm going to be talking about doing non-clinical jobs, like actually being hired by somebody else, not entrepreneurship. There are some things that overlap, but today we're just talking about non-clinical work. So not like jumping off and starting your own business or anything, just like kind of how to transition and actually work for someone else, but non-clinical work. So we're talking about working in industry, insurance, pharma, business, places like that. So I'm going to share with you a few tips about this. The first thing is your mindset. Start looking at it as an option. It's not one that you have to take, but just an option. It's going to take some preparation to decide to leave. You can look at the positives and negatives. Talk to people that have done it. And start asking questions, start looking around. There's a lot of groups out there now of docs that have left non-clinical medicine. There weren't certainly when I got started, and of course you can consider me a resource. I actually did a podcast episode of the Doctor's Life Podcast with Dr. George Cole oh gosh, probably about a year or so ago. So look in the archives on my website, www.drdianne.com. You can listen to that podcast. That'll help you too. But when I was thinking about leaving, and even when I left, like I was saying, I was told I was going over to the dark side, but by some were, kind of judgy, I must say. But others were kind of curious. And then there was another subset that was even kind of envious. When someone around you does something new and different, it can spark a lot of things inside. And I think that's what happened when I was talking about leaving clinical medicine, and then when I left, it just sparked a lot of interest. And you can start thinking about looking at things yourself, like, would I want to do that? Is that something I'd like to do? But in any case, if you're starting to think about leaving clinical medicine, your mindset is really important as you're approaching anything new or different. And you have to start thinking about, are you trying to escape something, or are you trying to move towards something? Because if you're trying to escape something, then that usually doesn't work. You're coming from a negative standpoint, and it's really hard to make good decisions when you're in a negative phase. So that's kind of where you need to start. Like, I remember when I was thinking about leaving medicine, sometimes I went through burnout, so I was like, I'd cry on my way to work sometimes, or, sometimes in men it shows up more as like anger, irritation, so it's like, I'm done. But, that like, I'm done is not really a good, spot to make decisions from, or even that super sad, tearful space. So thinking about your mindset and just looking at it, knowing that you have choices sometimes, can really help to get you on your way. The second thing I wanted to talk about that you need to consider is your skill set. What marketable skills do you have? Well, the beautiful thing about being a doctor is that you have tons of skills. You have people skills, you have management skills, you are the leader of a team. And in practice, you talk to patients every day. You do critical thinking. You're like, when you're on the team, usually the nurses and other people are asking you questions, kind of like the buck stops here. So you're used to being in that leadership role. You may find though, hey Val, hey, nice to see you. So, the thing is that you'll be trained in what you want to do, but having some general knowledge is really helpful. And looking at your skill set, what marketable skills you have, start looking at leadership positions that you've had, or committees that you've been on, or your research background. All of those things are marketable skills. And if you don't have those kind of things, that you may find that doing some preparation might be useful. Join a committee or volunteer to go do a talk. Start doing some reading. Go to a conference. The third thing I want to talk about is the financials of leaving clinical medicine, going into a non-clinical practice. You need to think about that how are you going to do that transition? Because it may take a while for you to find that kind of non-clinical work, and depending on what you're doing, it may or may not pay as well as your clinical work did. There are some advantages to it. For example, I work from home. This is actually my home office that I'm talking from. And I have the flexibility to be able to take my kids to school, pick them up, working from home, if I have an appointment or something like that, then I just make it. And, if somebody comes to do a repair, hey, they can just come and do their thing, and I'm working, I'm still doing my thing. So that's super cool. But getting back to the financial part, so if you're making more, you might need to prep yourself to downsize. Really look at your finances and kind of get things in order. Do you have college expenses coming up? And are you thinking of working maybe part-time? Like, if you're thinking of retiring versus working part-time, if you could work part-time. Another thing that's particularly for doctors is that you need to think about your malpractice, because if you're leaving and you're doing some clinical work, then you may have to pay tail coverage, or if you haven't had it covered by your employer, you need to consider that. If you're retiring altogether and you're kind of putting your stake in the ground and saying, I'm not doing clinical medicine anymore, at least in my case, when I did that, then I didn't have to pay tail coverage. But, meaning that in malpractice insurance, that will cover you for the years after you have left clinical medicine. Other things to consider are, really try not, you might be like, I'm done, I'm out of here, I don't care. But, don't look at your retirement savings as being a way to bridge you. Try not to touch that retirement savings early, or penalties, etc. And there's plenty of ways to make money as a doctor in non-clinical work that hopefully wouldn't have to touch that. And in terms of financials too, try and make that transition smooth. So if you have, ideally you have some savings before you made that transition and kind of had everything in order. I just read an article in Forbes not that long ago, and it was about transitioning into another kind of career, or just deciding whether or not to leave what you're doing. They were talking about corporate, but it's applicable here. And they said that the only thing worse than working is not having a job. And I think that's absolutely true, especially for docs. We are just used to working, and so just leaving one thing and kind of being in between jobs if you don't have a stable financial situation is not the best thing. And if you don't have a job to go to, it's probably not the best thing either. So kind of get that locked down before you make the leap. I'm going to talk about this last, but it's certainly something that you need to do as you're going along, and that is to make sure that you have support as you go through, because it's not necessarily the easiest road. Clinical medicine is considered to be part of being a doctor, right? So when you look at a new paradigm, a lot of times you need support around that. So reach out to somebody that's already done this. See if you can shadow them or talk to them. Really research, spend some time. Corporate life is different than practice life. Even though I work from home, I'm still, part of a larger corporation, and I do the coaching obviously as well, but I do some other work as well. Make sure that you enroll your spouse, your significant other, whoever is close to you. Most people have known you as like a doctor, and it's going to take a while to get them on board. Sometimes as not seeing patients anymore, and it's a shift for you too. That takes a while to make. So getting some support around that is really useful. So there's got the people in your life, your friends, your family, and then you can also reach out to Facebook groups or Dropout Club. DOC Dropout Club is helpful as well. So, and of course, you can reach out to me. I hope this has been helpful for you to get you started thinking about leaving clinical medicine. It is a super awesome topic and just something to discuss. So, docs, if you want to find out more about leaving clinical medicine, there are resources on my website, www.drdianne.com. That's www.drdianne.com. There's resources there for you to read. You can check out that episode of the Doctor's Life podcast that I believe is from February of last year, right there on the website. Again, that's www.drdianne.com. www.drdianne.com. And if you have questions, concerns, shoot me a note and the contact form. Thanks.
Thanks for listening today. If you like what you've heard, be sure to hit subscribe in your podcast app so that you won't miss an episode. You can also read show notes, get links, and contact me by going to drdianne.com. That's www.drdianne.com. And docs, while you're there, take the Physician Vitality Assessment, which will help you more clearly see if you are at risk for burnout.